Right now, there's only one great sci-fi show on television that's more science than fiction, and I got on a dang spaceship just to tell you about it. So, let's get technical.
Kyle, this isn't a real spaceship.
Technically, we're on a set.
If you know me and my taste in science fiction at all, you know that I must be talking about The Expanse, a show that I've been telling you nerds to watch for years. And that's because, in my estimation, no other show out there right now gets more science right. Oh, right. Gets more science right and does so in a way that's both clever and narratively interesting. If you haven't seen the show, The Expanse is based on a series of novels by James S.A. Corey, which is the pen name for the writing duo of Ty Franck and Daniel Abraham. The book and the show is set in a near future, a few hundred years in the future, where humanity has expanded out into the solar system, establishing colonies on moons, space stations, and other planets. Many other sci-fi shows have a similar setup, sure, but none of them, not Star Trek, not Battlestar, let the science speak for itself in the way that The Expanse does, and do so in a uniquely exciting way, presenting space as a character in and of itself. Yeah, I said it. Even if you haven't seen a single episode, I think it's pretty easy to prove my point, because The Expanse avoids pretty much every major unscientific trope of science fiction, and that's just downright impressive. The first and most obvious thing that the show does right is correct for the one trope that everyone in the world knows. There isn't any sound in space. But no sound in space is easy to correct for. The Expanse is a lot more clever than that. One of my favorite examples is very early on in the show. What has pop culture told you would happen if your spaceship had a hole blown through its hull? That you'd be sucked across the room and maybe forced through the hole, right? Wrong. Spacecraft are pressurized for people, and so if you were filling a spacecraft with air, you would do so until you reach around 14.7 pounds per square inch, or atmospheric pressure, or thereabouts. Now, what would actually happen if you encountered a puncture with a differential pressure of about 15 pounds per square inch and basically 0 psi? Well, if you were pressed up against this hole, you'd probably get the worst and most painful hickey ever, and you'd probably get broken blood vessels and a big welt and everything like that, but your whole body would not be forced through this hole. You can handle 14 or 15 pounds per square inch on your hand. And while it's true that the air near this puncture in a spaceship will be moving very violently, like at the speed of sound, if you just moved a little bit away, you wouldn't feel much of anything. It's like expecting to feel a plug pulled at the deep end of a pool when you were at the shallows. And so in The Expanse, when a puncture like this happens, a character calmly floats over to the puncture and then places a thin plastic binder like you'd have in school over it, and that's it. The puncture is sealed. No flying across the room, no ship-ripping explosion, because this is what would happen, and that's interesting. Another sci-fi trope that The Expanse upends is space travel itself. Think of every space show you've ever seen and imagine a spaceship traveling towards a space station, say. How does it get there? Well, usually we see it depicted as the engine's on, thrusting away the whole time, and then just stopping when it gets there. But if this was really to happen, because there's no air resistance or friction in space, if you were under a constant thrust the entire time, you wouldn't slow down at all. And when you got to the destination, you would have all of this built up speed, and you would likely just smash into your destination, destroying it. And so what The Expanse does, and what you'd actually have to do for a maneuver like this, is spend up to half your travel time turned around and thrusting in the opposite direction to your travel to slow down by the time you get to your destination. This takes CGI time and money and effort, and this is something that almost no other sci-fi show does. Flip and burn, baby. Flip and burn.
flipping.
Not only are the space physics on point in this program, very few sci-fi shows really explore the effects of space on the human body in narratively interesting ways. Gravity always matters. Every single molecule that makes you up has been under the influence of gravity since before you were born. At every moment, the Earth's mass is acting to pull you down towards its center with an acceleration of 9.81 meters per second every second. But the Earth's crust gets in the way, and you feel this reactionary force as your weight. Every single thing about you has evolved to deal with this weight, from your circulatory system to how your bones are structured. And so it makes sense that if you were born in space or under a significantly different gravity, your body might be different. In the Expanse universe, humans born on Ceres, the largest object in the asteroid belt, are taller and lankier as their spines expand in the third of a G that they live under, and they literally cannot handle the relatively crushing gravity of Earth. And because humans born into the militaristic Martian society live under 0.4 G, they constantly train their bodies under simulated 1 G Earth gravity, because one day they know they might have to invade it and their bodies would have to deal with that. Oh, hey, I'm not legitimate salvage. Hey, back up, man. Oh, gravity always matters, but maybe more consequential than a constant value for gravity is a rapid change in its apparent magnitude. When you hear the term G-force, we're not really talking about a force at all. Rather, we're talking about how quickly you are accelerating or decelerating in relation to standard Earth gravity. So if this is around 10 meters per second, if you suddenly start accelerating at 20 meters per second every second, you are now pulling around 2G. And there's a limit for how much a human body can take. To make interplanetary life really possible, any ship is necessarily going to have to travel really, really fast. In the Expanse, very advanced engines provide a consistent 1 G of thrust between destinations. This is to provide artificial gravity and weight on spaceships, and also to build up velocity very, very quickly. But if they ever have to travel faster than this, the show lets you know in some clever ways. For example, the character that created the show's advanced fusion drive engines was actually killed by his creation because it kept accelerating and accelerating until his body got so heavy that his hands literally could not reach the controls, and his body was shot off into space forever. Now that's accuracy! And have you ever been watching a sci-fi show like me and thought to yourself, gee, they're traveling at like warp 6 or whatever, and then they get to where they're going and they stop almost instantaneously and they're not wearing seatbelts and nothing happens. Wow, that's weird. Well, you could just hand wave this away with some kind of technobabble like inertial dampers or whatever. The Expanse truly embraces the consequences of speeding up and slowing down in space. In maybe my favorite scenes, something happens that I've never seen before on any science fiction television show. A ship with a single crew member is traveling at interplanetary speed and then encounters a device, a ring, that makes everything that passes through it slow way, way down. And instead of the crew member just shaking about his terminal and maybe beaming down to a planet or something like that, this happens. Accuracy! Oh! He gets turned into human salsa. Wow, there are a lot of me's in here. As you may have guessed by now, I love The Expanse for its dedication to accuracy, and I could go on with many more examples of the science that the show gets right, but I want to point out one thing that's very important. All of this care doesn't just show up on screen. It has to start from the bottom up, from the authors to the set designers to the prop makers to the showrunners to the cast, crew, and the actors themselves. And it's right there. You can see it, but don't take my word for it. Why don't we go ask them? Amazon Studios graciously put me on a transport to Toronto, and I'm here now to check out the sets of The Expanse, dozens of them from seasons 1 through 4, and to talk with the cast, the crew, the actors about making a great sci-fi show that respects science and is also intensely watchable. I mean, Amazon must care, right? Or else, why would I be allowed in here? First of all, every great space and sci-fi show needs a great space set, and The Expanse is no different. This is the set of the Rocinante, and it is beautifully detailed. One thing that I want to point out about The Expanse, though, that is so important to the world building of the show is that the Rocinante, transport ships, military ships, they do not have decks that are oriented like every spaceship you've ever seen. Like a car or like a boat or an airplane, most shows will have the decks oriented parallel to where the engine is. But if you're trying to be realistic like The Expanse, that's just not going to work. So to create artificial gravity, they do so using thrust and by pointing the engine perpendicular to the decks. So right now, the decks are oriented this way, and the engine is directly below my feet. That's how The Expanse creates gravity in a realistic way. No hand waving, no weird anti-gravity technology needed. A detail like this doesn't just happen. Someone has to help shape and craft these worlds. So I have one half of James S.A. Corey here, one of the humans who helps put all the detail into these worlds, Ty Frank. Hey, Ty.
Hey.
What goes into crafting a show like The Expanse, knowing that you have some kind of guidelines while doing so?
Yeah, you hire a lot of really smart people. Mm-hmm. Our set designers, our prop masters, and our costume designers are all really committed to getting the details right.
Sure.
And then you just have a lot of meetings where you talk about the way things would actually work and sort of the physical requirements of every object. And then they work really hard to get the details right.
Has there been a scene or dialogue that you can remember where there was a tension between accuracy and narrative and you had to go one way or the other?
The thing that we always bump up against is travel time. Because in the books, we can just say it takes 3 weeks to fly to here.
Sure.
In a show, it's a really boring 3 episodes where all 3 episodes are just people sitting and waiting to get there.
Still going.
Yeah, so you have to you have to imply the passage of time.
Sure.
Without ever saying, 3 weeks ago when we left. You never want to do that. So that's always a tightrope walk. Probably the best example of that is Mineo, the slingshotter.
Yeah.
Who flies out to the ring, and it's really, really far. And when you see him, he's got like kind of a beard, and then when he gets to the ring, he's got a big beard.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it was probably a little too much.
That looked like a couple of years ago.
Yeah. But you know, the other thing with TV and anything on the screen is subtlety people don't see.
What I like about The Expanse is that it will take details that are maybe bending a little bit in terms of the physics or the science, but then it will show more realistic outcomes from that. So if you did bend a little bit in engine technology, you could bring travel times down, or you might get killed by the acceleration alone. And actually, one of my favorite scenes in the show was Mineo when I don't think I've ever seen any science fiction show deal with deceleration in the same way.
Yeah, so when people ask about other sci-fi shows, I'm like, how do you feel about that? You know, how do you feel about how they handle the science? My favorite example of something that even as a little kid, I never understood, and I will preface this by saying I love original Star Trek, but I never understood how you could be going dozens of times the speed of light and come to what appears to be an instant stop.
Yeah.
And people are not just a smear of atoms on the inside walls of the ship.
Yeah.
And so the older I got, the more that stuff bumped me. And so the Mineo scene is really me saying, here's what would happen.
Yeah.
Like if you're going 150,000 kilometers an hour and then you drop to like 20,000, you become a red smear.
Yeah. Well, obviously there's so much more detail that we can talk about. Thank you so much for having me here, answering my questions, and letting me just, wander around set for a bit.
I did not agree to this, and you should probably leave.
Of course, no space opera would be complete without some great players, and I have 2 actors from The Expanse with me, Dominique Tipper, Stephen Strait. Thank you so much for joining me. We're on
Hi, friends.
Hello. We're on a lovely set here. I have some questions about being an actor on a show like this. What is it like to come to a show that has to be so accurate, that has such a clear vision? How do you interpret that and internalize that as an actor and actress and then get that out onto the screen?
Well, I actually think the fact that it is so detailed and so like specific about the science makes it easier for us. Because,
how so?
Well, I just feel like when there's more attention to detail, it gives us more stuff to work with.
Sure.
So, you know, we're not having to like do press and explain croddy science to people.
Sure, and you don't have to wonder like how you're supposed to come in on wires.
Yeah, and if I'm like, what would this be like if we were actually in zero G? People aren't just going, just don't worry about it. I feel like I've become maybe how frustrated like people who know science have become with Hollywood, because I keep seeing things and I'm like, they'd be under thrust. The shit was under thrust, so there wouldn't be zero G. And like, I'm like, oh my God, I know, this is so annoying.
You're a nerd now.
Having science be portrayed in an accurate way, it adds all of these available moments of drama. You know, so often it's hard to shoot zero gravity accurately and hard to shoot the laws of physics in an accurate way. But if you do, and you have that circumstance, the environment of space in and of itself creates conflict and drama,
sure.
And it's dangerous. And for us, just with our scene dynamics, it always makes it so much more interesting and a lot more to play off of.
It's very hostile.
Yeah.
Like space is hostile, and I think me and Kaz were talking about this the other day. Like it's the main character in the show in a sense of all the peril it continuously brings us, and just the fact that, you know, as a human, you go outside, you're dead, basically. There's not like options, and everyone's just trying to be careful about what they're doing to not die, and I think that really adds to it.
For sure.
I remember a scene that both of you actually did together where you had to be tethered together, and then you pushed off of her to use conservation of energy and momentum to get yourself down to the floor.
That was the first season. I mean, you know, we weren't anywhere near as apt with science at that time.
Sure.
But you know, as the Donager's engines go off, we start to float off the ground, and then she starts to float out in front of me, and then hooking her on, and then pushing her away brings me back down.
Yeah.
It was just the education of how all of this works. Was one, really interesting, but two, again, adds to the drama of what we're showing.
There's quite a few things in our show that have become big dramatic elements because they know it can be.
Even one for me was we have to get people to the drum of the belter ship because blood
bleeding out.
Because blood pools, and because of the cohesion, the adhesion of the blood, it won't drain out of a wound if they're in zero G. And I'd never thought about that. I was like, it made me feel smart again.
And you like that, eh? Because you don't normally, or?
The Expanse's commitment to detail doesn't end at just the sets, of course. You have to make sure everything looks right and who is that guy? Anyway, and feels right, and that includes getting zero G scenes just right. And to help me demonstrate how the Expanse does this, I have Shaq here. Hey, Shaq.
How you doing?
Hey. Well, sorry if that's a little uncoordinated. So what are we gonna do here in terms of a stunt for zero G?
Well, right now all we're gonna do is demonstrate how we might create a tumbling through space or through zero G environment.
So of course, what these cables are doing are removing my weight. And that's just what zero G or microgravity is anyway. It's not the absence of gravity. Even at the International Space Station level, those astronauts are still feeling about 90% of Earth gravity. What is really important is that you're not feeling your own weight. So to simulate that, this is gonna take my, 65 kilograms or so off of my body, and I'm still gonna have those kilograms, but I won't feel the weight, and that's what we're getting here. Okay, are we all cinched up and ready to go?
We are cinched up and ready to go. You just please let us know if anything's uncomfortable or not where it's supposed to be.
Try not to look like I'm favoring one side, right? So this, it's starting to reorient where I believe I am. It does feel like I'm in some kind of different situation here, coming down towards the deck of the ship. And I just realized if I pull my legs in a bit, I can even go more.
Yeah, that's your speed control.
Yeah, this is just the conservation of momentum. Changing my moment of inertia here. Just spin around. When you're in zero G, sometimes you still need a little bit of help.
Hi, Kyle.
Hey, Adam. I'm just hanging around.
Just thought I'd catch you.
Anyway, can you throw me back up?
All right, here we go.
See you in space!
Now, I know I probably sound like a repeating transmission at this point, but The Expanse simply is one of the great sci-fi shows of our generation. It's exciting, it's inspiring, and I think it's rewarding for storytellers and viewers alike in the way that it incorporates science. I just know that it has to be inspiring young scientists and young engineers, and I guess this video is kind of like a love letter to the show. I want to support science where... Hey, Wes Chatham, what are you doing here?
Oh, hi, Kyle.
Hey, man, what's going on?
No, I don't want to do your interview thing.
No, it's cool. We can take a second. You good?
It's just that this year at Comic-Con,
Yeah.
This was our 5th panel together, and
Yeah.
well, it's just you didn't get my name right, twice, and I'm not want to make a big thing out of it, but I feel like I thought we might have a stronger relationship.
Yeah, look, man, I know, I guess it just slipped out of there, and, I didn't want it to come between us or what we could, have in terms of a friendship, and, I'd really like it if we could, we could be buddies.
Really?
Yeah, of course.
No fooling?
No fooling. Oh, man.
I knew we could be buddies.
Yeah, of course. I love it. And Seamus is one of my favorite characters. It's great.
Seamus.
I mean, if you couldn't tell, I am just a huge fan of the show. Amazon didn't pay me to say any of this and give it a lot of praise. Everyone that I've met has been fantastic and so excited and so nice. And what is so awesome to see is that everyone from the top down cares about the accuracy of the show and the message and what they're doing. Even like the people who build the sets are aware of what gravity is doing and why they are building things the way that they do. They ask themselves the question, why does this ship have windows? Why would a spaceship need windows? Like, these are discussions that just the people who are working on plywood are having. So I love the show. I really encourage you to watch it. I think it's fantastic. And, if I keep saying that, maybe I could be on it.